Greetings, fellow scholars of the livestream. I'm VIZZ from the Cosmo Observatory, and in today's rough analysis we'll tackle the Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade Yuffie DLC, the new screenshots that came out, alongside a few new information as well about the characters especially, which has now been dubbed INTERmission. And for the sake of brevity, let's skip the dilly-dally shilly-shally and dive right into it. First up are screenshots with battle mechanics, visuals, and some other neat details. In the screenshot we see here, Yuffie performs her press square attack, which gives Yuffie the ability to attack multiple enemies while moving backwards. And here in this screen we can see that she's kind of jumping backwards, so it's not clear if it happens automatically or if we're even able to manipulate her trajectory with the left analog stick, or just move around slowly while shooting your shuriken towards the enemies, kind of like Barret does. But it seems like it's more like an automatic thing. What threw me off first in these screenshots here are those green wind effects, but in the end they probably just signify Yuffie's innate affinity to wind, not in terms of gameplay but in terms of theme, as we don't see any wind affinity in her icon down there, born that later, and she hasn't used up any ATB, which means that those wind effects are part of her press square attack. As it is described, this attack seems to be good for gaining distance while still dealing physical damage and doing some crowd control, as it seems to be kind of an area effect attack, as both rats here are being damaged, 68 and 66 respectively. Speaking of rats, which enemy do you think they are? Definitely not Doom Rats or Were Rats. They are much bigger, much muscular and voluminous, and have a different and much more naked and glossy tail. So they're just normal albino rats or something like that. And as we see later, this is the very first encounter in the DLC. So, game starts and we fight rats. Classic. And here you can see the first high-resolution version of this Moogle poster, which we've already got a glimpse of in the trailer here. And according to Shadamp, shout out to Shadamp for deciphering the kanji and kana here. Shadamp made a transcription of those and I ran them through a translator, DeepL, my translator of choice, much better than Google Translate. It says full of hearts, full of green, and urbanization enhancement weak. So it seems that this post is pretty old because it didn't seem to have gone anywhere, judging by the area outside of the slums, which is basically a barren wasteland. And right here we also see an entrance to this building, which Yuffie can probably just jump onto by using one of those action icons. Now I'll show you proof of why I think this is the very first encounter. Do you see the junk line behind there? Some sandbags, crates, and especially this bright, rusty metal plate with some metal bars or something behind. Well, it kinda looks the same behind her, right? This is a screenshot from the trailer where she falls down from the sector separation wall, and this one is right behind her. So if my eyes don't deceive me, this is the very first encounter before we enter the very first building. Now let's have a look at the next screenshot. It also seems to be kinda close to the plate separation wall, as we can see by the existence of the reactor number 8 in the background. And separation walls always start at the base of reactors, but still seems farther away than this one here. So I suppose it's behind the building complex, but before the next building complex where we get to later. As we can see here in the trailer, there's some sort of red scaffolding going on here. which seems to be the same one as this. So it's possible that we're around here, behind this first building, this one, and somewhere behind this place. But it's only speculation because it's really hard to place, as I don't see any other landmarks, and I haven't been able to see or find those elements, especially this high chimney-like thing. So we'll see. But what is really clear is the materia up there. This one. I really hope it's one of the newer materials, not just another one of those we know from the base game. And we can climb up there using a ladder, and probably more ladders, because there are 2 more levels to this construction. Hard to say if we come through this construction to this area, or we enter this area first and then can climb the construction to get the material. Or maybe we need to climb the construction to even progress, who knows. And now, what is this enemy? It's a new one because we didn't encounter a wolf in the base game, but there are wolves in the original game. There are 3, but one of them doesn't really look like this one in terms of color scheme, and the placement near the Icicle Inn area also doesn't make sense, so we have the other 2. And this one is the Calm Fang, which can be encountered around the Calm area, between Calm and Midgar. And the other one is the Nibelwolf, of course encountered around Nibelheim. So, which one is it? In terms of location, the Nibelwolf would make sense, but they probably didn't want to insert a purple wolf into a rather realistic looking area. The purple wolves look weird, probably, very unnatural. So the Nibelwolf is more likely in terms of color. So I'm pretty sure they just combined the 2, used the color from the Nibelwolf and the Calm Fang for locations. So it was possible that this one could be dubbed Calm Fang, or something completely new, like Wasteland Wolf or Desert Wolf or something like that. I wouldn't be mad. Now, what does Yuffie do here? This is just a screenshot showcasing her throw attack. You see, it already changed to retrieve. So she threw her shuriken towards the enemy here, the wolf. And as we know, her shuriken will stick here and rotate, while she can do long-range chi attacks or ninjutsu attacks, or whatever tickles your fancy. But what's interesting is she has full health and full mana, which isn't the case here in the very first fight, where she lost mana and health. So why is that? Either she already used up some items to fully heal up, or there was a bench, which I don't think so right at the beginning, maybe there is, or the devs just spruced up her numbers, just executed the dev command to either heal up, or to just place her right here with full stats. Now let's go a bit further into the DLC, chronologically. Here she executes her combo finisher of her unarmed long-range ninjutsu attack, which is in this case a fire attack, because of her fire element, which we can see here is almost halfway done. A little bit more than half of the whole timer left. And we can also see tiny bits of remnants of her Wutian Chi symbols in the balls that surround her while executing attacks, which we've seen in previous analyses. And the black remnant of the symbol for fire, I presume. And we also see her shuriken still rotating here on the enemy. Because of course she's unarmed and has already thrown a shuriken at the enemy to even be able to use ninjutsu attacks. And which enemies are those? Pretty simple. Gorges, which can also be found in the outskirts of Sector 7 slums, also known as Scrapyard Boulevard, which is where we first can try out Tifa's combat. And it seems that there are two gorges, one here with the legs hanging down there and another pair of legs here, sorts, so there seem to be two pretty close to each other. Although we only see one damage number, But it's possible that the other damage number is delayed or something, or it's just an optical illusion, or it's another variant with longer legs, but it doesn't look like it. But now you ask, wait, isn't the Gorger weak to ice attacks, and this is a fire attack and it still says weakness? Well, it's also weak against magical attacks in general, so even fire attacks, which are magical, would hit its weak spot. Now, within the batch of new information we got, it also describes an ability called Elemental Ninjutsu, or Ninjutsu Change, as it's called in the Famitsu version of the article, the Japanese version. This ability changes Yuffie's attacks to one of the 4 elements, fire, ice, lightning, and wind, so we are able to easily target the enemy's weakness. Now the question is, does the ability automatically switch Yuffie's element to the weakness of the enemy that's targeted? Or can we manually set the element? For example, with the left and right directional pad buttons, similar to changing the elemental magic tier, Fire, Fire and Firaga? I think both is possible. One is cheaper, because you don't have to think or assess the enemy first to know which element they're weak against. But manually selecting the element could prove cumbersome in the end, because you always have to check, oh, which one is it, and then select through tiers, which would be especially annoying for shortcuts, I presume. So I lean more towards automatic targeting, but then why does Yuffie's element change to fire here? Maybe because Gorgers are also weak against magic in general, which takes precedence, and the ability then just chooses randomly one of those elements, or just the first one, which is fire. But the bigger question is, where are we? Interestingly, we already know some landmarks in the background, like those vertical red scaffolding towers, the silos behind there, some pipes on a wall we see through building wall, the open building wall. This building wall especially, which we'll see later, and also the high railroad here, and I think you can see it here. Evidence can be found here. Do you remember this scene where Yuffie uses this crane element to jump over the gap? Well, we see the same 2 vertical red strut towers, scaffolding towers, and here we can also see parts of this element, this silo back there, which is much taller. Here's the high railroad again, and the wall with the pipes in front, which we see here. So it's probably a building back there. We can see it much better here. Same location, where Yuffie fights a lesser dragon. Still the same elements here. And then we can see this wall, the higher wall with the red scaffolding and the corrugated iron, I think it's called. Here's the higher one, and then it drops down a level to this part, which is here. And back there we see another building, another shack, which can be seen here. Unfortunately, we don't see this element, which is probably a crane of sorts. So it's very much possible that the building which Yuffie's in right now is the same as we see here. Why? Because it's open on this side, like here, and it contains the same strut structure. But it also looks much bigger than the one here. I think it's kind of similar though. Might even be the same one, so it's possible that those screenshots are all very close together, with this one being further down, maybe even outside or behind this part, even further down the road. It's hard to say, but that's my prediction. Another prediction is that we can also use this elevator, this cargo elevator, to either just get to a chest or something, or that we enter this part of the building through this elevator. In either case, the elevator seems to be on our level, so either we take it to move up a level, or we had already taken it to move down to this level. The next screenshot is already in the train graveyard, as we theorized before. I still think that's the case. And here Yuffie uses her Windstorm ability. And it seems like, as we'll see later, anytime she uses an ability, this symbol here appears, with an ability-specific symbol in the middle, and maybe the same here, or also ability-specific symbols in the corners. Hard to say, and it's not really relevant right now. But what is important is that she's using Windstorm on her own. So Windstorm can be either used by herself or in conjunction with Sonon as the synergized Windstorm, as we've seen multiple times in the earlier analyses. You can also see that she has used up an ATB, a full ATB bar, which correlates with using an ability. She has already thrown her shuriken towards an enemy, but I don't see it anywhere here. Maybe it's cleverly concealed somehow, or there are more enemies around off-screen, which are currently being damaged by her rotating shuriken. Another interesting detail is that the main symbol of the ability is here in front of her, still shining brightly. But there's also another symbol up here, black, it's already fading. But we'll get to this one later as it pertains to a different ability which has this symbol in the middle. Just keep this symbol in mind. We'll get to it eventually. And we also see the same leaf effects as we already did during this ability here. You see leaves flying all over the place. And here's the same symbol again. We'll tackle this specific ability a bit later because it's described in another screenshot. And in the previous analysis about Yuffie's DLC, we noticed that those leaves only show up when she's not imbued with an element. Let's keep this in mind for when the DLC releases and then check out if this is still the case. Now let's have a look at the area. We already know this specific battle, Crib Chase, and this new nightmarish monster here, as well as the ground and the wall, which is here. This is part of the scene where Sonon and Yuffie execute the synergized Art of War ability. We can already see some familiar elements. The ground here, those sandbags, and the dilapidated walls. However, this is not the exact same corner. Why? Because here there seems to be some sort of elevator, which looks like an elevator we'll see later, rhyme not intended. And the wall is also inconsistent. Here we see a hole here on the third element from the left. The hole here is in the fourth element from the left, and the background also looks completely different. There seems to be another building where we can see inside, but here is a whole concrete wall. And also the elevator, which we see to the left, is nowhere to be found here. This whole thing looks like just a support pillar or something similar. And the lighting is also different. So my prediction is those two corners are opposing each other. Or this one is in a completely different area nearby. Although the enemies are the same, maybe it's the same area. And if so, the reusage of this asset here is pretty cheap. And if we zoom in a little, you can see them better. The Crib Chase and this nightmarish, horrible visage. Look at this. Kind of like one of a spider with this very weird predator-looking toothy maw and all those spikes along the body and numerous spikes on his club-like tail. It's just a horrible creature, horrible creature. What on Gaia happened to you? Probably just some Mako poisoning or something like that. Alright, enough nightmares. Let's move on to the next screenshot. Here we can already see what I was alluding to before regarding the elevators. Here this elevator element looks exactly the same as this one. Here the yellow-black stripes, the grates up there, an opening here, and the cross struts, which can also be seen here. Grate, yellow-black stripes, an opening here. But it's possible that this area here is just the bottom of this tall elevator and we eventually end up here. However, this is not the same level as we see here in this screenshot of the trailer, because just down there we see some cross struts, whatever that element is. We don't see it here, unless it is strategically hidden behind deconstruct here, which is possible, I guess. But still, for now, in my mind, it's not the same level. What's also interesting is those two elevators are not the same. There seem to exist two separate platforms, which can be sent up or down, respectively. And here it looks like there's one big platform operated in the center with this pulley system. This one is for smaller cargo, and this one's for larger cargo, I presume. Alright, back to the screenshot itself. In here, we see Yuffie has imbued herself with ice, of which she still has 3/4 left. Around 3/4, almost 3/4 left. And again, she's fighting against two creepshays. And here we see her shuriken rotating in the middle of both, still damaging them. And pretty much the end of her last combo hit, combo finisher, which is of course a nice attack. Why practically the end of it? Because the symbols around her have already vanished and are gone completely. Now, do you remember this screenshot here? In the extended features trailer, they showed this new scene where we see material cargo containers being moved around using a conveyor belt, which also seems to be located in this same area according to the walls, as we see here. However, elevators back there are nowhere to be seen in the other one. And if we check the surroundings in general, they don't really match up. The only thing that kinda does match up is the existence of a staircase back there. You can also see here. However, the rest doesn't really match up at all. Also, around here, there should be a conveyor belt holding more of those cargo containers, as we see here. Unless they just turn around right here underneath this platform to the left. But I can also not see any of those elements. Over here, there's nothing. Just scaffolding. So this is yet another area compared to this one. So it seems that this whole complex is pretty large. Oh, and before I forget, just to make sure we don't miss anything, Yuffie does not cast normal ice magic, as her MP are full, as well as the ATB, so it has to be just a normal attack. Which makes sense here. And now for the last one. And again, you probably have noticed it before, no Sonon at all in this. So they really don't want to showcase Sonon's battle, or just wanted to focus on Yuffie's battle in those screenshots. In any case, we have a good view on the boss here, which is very detailed. Very, very detailed. I'd say PS5 worthy. But what's interesting here is that those magazines I spoke of in previous analyses are actually in use here. They're not horizontal, but vertically positioned. The lid is open, and according to those 15 squares we see down there, it might be able to launch 30 missiles at us. Or maybe lasers, or maybe shoot out little drones which attack us or something like that. It's hard to tell. We also get a little bit of a better look at those laser dots, which are a rectangle and two stripes, one above, one below. Kind of weird. Still think that this is just because it looks cool. But as we discovered in previous analyses, this boss kind of does connect with those here. Kind of shooting balls of light towards it or something like that. It's still a little bit weird. There is a connection. And seeing those closer, it's fair to say that they might be included in environmental damage or something like that. Not really damage to the environment, but the environment damaging us by proxy of this boss monster here. Now what I find really weird is that this screenshot should describe Yuffie's banishment ability, her third ability. And we see that it's an ability because of this symbol in the middle. Here we see it a little bit better. We have already seen it here as well. Windstorm ability. And here the supposed banishment ability. However, in the trailer she uses another ability which contains this symbol, which we've already seen here as a symbol separate to the actual ability symbol in front of Yuffie. And since the circle around seems bigger, it has secondary elements to this main element in the middle and even more symbols in the corners here. Those two don't seem to be the same, especially since the symbol in the middle is different. And this one can be seen on the other one as well. And here's my argument. Banishment is an ability described as non-elemental damage, generally, which can be powered up to 3 times or up to level 3, according to how many ATB units you've used up before. So let's go back here. Yuffie uses Windstorm ability, just this symbol in front of her. But we also see the banishment symbol up there, which to me says that using this ability has used up an ATB and also powered up banishment ability 1 time. So the logical conclusion is that this ability we see here in the trailer is the banishment ability, which of course the boss is immune because we deduced that it's immune against magical attacks, at least in its first form. But here there are also other elements at play. First, it's the different symbol, which glows yellow. Why yellow? Because she has just been imbued with lightning. Countdown timer is still completely full. Not even a slightest millimeter or pixel of time elapsed or passed. So it's been applied just right now. And since this element is glowing yellow, which is the same as the lightning symbol in her status bar, my prediction is that this specific ability is the elemental change, which just imbued Yuffie with lightning, which we can see by this lightning effect around this ninjutsu sphere as well. Now, to be fair, Yuffie's pose is practically the same as we see here during her banishment movement, and the rest looks also pretty similar, but still, there are differences as we've discussed before, and the timer is also at full capacity and no time has elapsed so far. So either this is the elemental change ability, or using the banishment ability resets her current elemental affinity. Which would kinda be weird, as Yuffie can then just use banishment towards the end of the timer, of the countdown, then just refresh it and keep the element, which could be an interesting strategy, but I still think there's a little bit of discrepancy here. However, what I must say is that the description also says that the banishment ability takes over the element Yuffie is currently imbued with. So it's possible that the neutral symbol in here changes to the respective elemental symbol in its respective color. Okay, on to the next section. With the reveal of the AVALANCHE members' names, one might think that me, Vyzz, has been wrong about their identity. As in Nelly, Al, Finn and someone else. Because they're now called Nayo, Billy Bob, Polk, and this one is, let me try to pronounce this in Chinese, Jijie, or something like that. Let's just call him Jijie, because that's much simpler and that's how the Japanese pronounce it, Jijie. So I guess I have to carry this L with pride. Wait a minute, not so fast there. Because this guy here, Jijie, has this quote with his new description. The you people are you. It's a code. So Yuffie and Sonon are the you people. Probably the derivative of Wutai or something. So he gives them a code name. Besides this fact about code names, when we look at the names of the other 3, they kinda sound suspicious. She's called Nayo. Well, it's a common Japanese female name, so nothing to object there. However, a Japanese name for someone who was born in the slums, and I don't really remember anyone native to Midgar with a Japanese name. Maybe my memory is just faulty, like Jessie, Kate, Marl, and all the others. Anyway, it kinda sounds a little bit fishy. Now next one, Billy Bob. This is just too blatant. Billy Bob, who's actually named Billy Bob. It's like a double generic name. and Polk, and it reminds me of polka, the dance with Bohemian origin, which is now part of the Czech Republic. The more you know. But if you pronounce his name the English-British way, it might be Poke. And Poke also can be used for being poked fun at, and later you'll see that he's being teased by the others, being poked fun at, so to speak. Now with the theory that those three names are code names, Jijia might also be a code name, maybe not, who knows. But the thing is, Jijia is the only Wu-Taian who lives in Midgar and acts as the liaison between Avalanche and the Wu-Tai professional government. So he's not born there, he's not quite part of the clique, and he's tasked with welcoming Yuffie and so on and showing them around. So that leaves the other three, Nayo, Billy Bob and Polk, or as I call them, Nelly, Al and Finn. Why? Let's find out. Let's tackle Nelly aka Nayo first. Her task is to monitor the movements of the splinter groups, and Barrett calls her the quartermaster in English, or as he describes her in Japanese, she's in charge of supplies, which the quartermaster is incidentally. But monitoring the movements does not exclude being in charge of supplies, and as we saw in a previous analysis, her nameplate or description plate here says ASO, Avalanche Supply Officer. So there's the connection. In addition to that, she also prepares the fake IDs which Yuffie and her friends need to get to the plate. And Barrett also says that Jesse and her work together a lot. And Jesse is also in charge of the IDs for Barrett's Avalanche group. However, in the remake, she never claims to have made or created the IDs herself. So it's still within the realm of the possibilities that Nelly created the IDs for Jesse, which she and the others then used in the bombing missions for Mako Reactors 1 and 5. Also, some of you might think, wait, Barrett's lines kinda look different here. And those lines also kind of look different for those who remember the English lines in the blog post. For accuracy's sake, I decided to take the Japanese original texts for the article and Barrett's lines, ran them through DeepL, which is a very good translator and translates into readable and almost natural sounding English text. So I stuck with that for maximum accuracy, because the other lines you can easily just look up and see for yourself. The top text represents the description from the new blog post. The bottom one, the translated Japanese lines from Barrett in his resolution scene. Now it's also interesting, Barrett says they're often mistaken for sisters even though they look nothing alike. So this mystery is now resolved. Even the game doesn't claim they look alike, but they're still mistaken for sisters, probably because they're similar mannerisms and because they're really good buddies with each other. So yeah, I think this is evidence enough to still believe Nayo equals Nelly. Let's go to the next one. Billy Bob. The description claims that he's the most experienced of all members, but he's not pretentious and has a carefree and relaxed personality. Billy Bob makes sense in this case because he hides his true identity, being very experienced, and pretends to just be a regular old dude who doesn't stand out. Billy Bob is just, I think, the most generic name you can think of, probably, besides John Doe. And now here's the kicker. He's a drinker who never gets drunk, interesting superpower, and is said to gather information in bars. And what does Barrett say about him? We had a guy named Al who was in charge of gathering information. He's the guy who gets the passcodes from all over the place. He's a man of color, so he can pretend to be a nobody, but he's actually very experienced and can probably just slip into another one's role. So he's a man of color. The stash of flowers and the thing with Tifa is nothing to be concerned about because it's not coming up. Although the connection to Tifa makes sense because he's gathering information in bars. He has a crush on Tifa probably because he tried the flower trick on her once but failed. So he's probably also a lot in 7th Heaven. So yeah, drinking at bars, hitting on Tifa, 7th Heaven is Billy Bob Al. And the third one, Polk. He's said to be the youngest and the most naive of the members. He's treated as everyone's little brother, he's teased but loved. And he has an interesting passion for the popular game Fort Condor, more on that later. In Japanese, Barrett says, in Avalanche there was this kid, Finn. Kid? He's the youngest, everyone's little brother. No matter what you asked him to do, he'd always try to slack off. In addition to his work, he has a passion for the popular game Fort Condor, and he says, bored? Then why don't you play Fort Condor? So he probably likes to play Fort Condor over everything else besides drawing, because Barrett also says the only thing he liked to do was draw. He's responsible for the stamps in the tunnels. So he likes to draw and play Fort Condor. Everything else he doesn't really like to do. So being a kid, naive, being poked fun at. So yeah, poke equals Finn, question mark. So yeah, and the reason why Barrett doesn't talk about TJ here is easy. He hasn't been growing up with the others in Midgar. Only lives there, probably only since recently, as a liaison between Yuffie and Avalanche. So he's not quite within the group. Now, what I'm asking, do Yuffie and Sonon know about their real names? Or since they're still kind of outsiders, are they only operating with code names, at least on Avalanche's side? We'll see, I guess. Still, it would be very, very strange and weird and a missed opportunity to not expound on Nelly, Al and Finn and just kick them out of the continuity and introduce completely new ones. So my best guess is still those are Nelly, TJ, or whoever you're called, Al and Finn. Or until the game comes out and proves me wrong, and then I'll gladly take the L. Now just some thoughts about this Fort Condor. We know that Fort Condor is a real place, it exists, and Shinra is trying to take over the fort and get to the reactor, or build the reactor. No wait, I think they built the reactor, but Fort Condor people took it back and now try to fight off Shinra because they're trying to protect the Phoenix. Or the Condor up top, which then eventually dies, and eventually the Phoenix arises and leaves behind the Phoenix material. Now, do we still get the minigame called Fort Condor in part 2? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they reworked this whole part. I kinda hope so. And Fort Condor is actually a minigame we can play at least in Gold Saucer, maybe in the Yuffie DLC, but you better keep your expectations in check. So now the question is this Fort Condor game, which is a board game according to the English blog post? The Famitsu article doesn't mention it being a board game, unfortunately. Is this a propaganda piece made by Shinra? Or is it just a reflection of a reality made by someone else than Shinra? Maybe even an Avalanche or Wutai game, which kinda has an anti-Shinra sentiment to it? Would kinda make sense, because if it's a Shinra propaganda piece and an Avalanche member loves to play it, would kinda be strange. In the official English article, it says that Fort Condor is a board game that's taken the Undercity by storm. So only the Undercity, it's popular there, probably not on the plates. So this is more evidence that this board game has been developed by someone other than Shinra to reflect reality, to spread the word about what happens at Fort Condor and how to beat Shinra probably. So yeah, I still hope this minigame is there in some form, hopefully modernized, maybe in the main game, there at Fort Condor itself, or as a throwback in the Gold Saucer, or maybe even here, we play the board game in the DLC, or it's just lore stuff, completely gone, and Fort Condor has been reworked completely. We'll see. I'm fine with either, as long as all facets of it are well rounded, feel right, fit into lore and gameplay and everything, and just well made. And has a little bit of humor to it. And now we come to the part where many of you will probably cringe. Vyzz. And inadvertently, I have to warn you, Genesis. Wait, don't click away yet. It's not really about Genesis, but more about the connection to Genesis, Deepground, the other members, and especially stuff about the Dirge of Cerberus online mode, which is so packed with lore and characters and stuff, which is practically lost to time, kind of. You can still watch playthroughs and translated cutscenes of it on YouTube, but many information about all of this is so obscure and there are many misconceptions around, and please don't trust the FF Wiki on this, which is why I consulted MJ Gallagher, which is probably the only expert I know, maybe along with a few other people at livestream.net, which have a deep understanding about the whole Dirge of Cerberus lore, including the online mode and everything. So huge thanks to MJ Gallagher for providing me with more information and correcting my own misconceptions. Alright, let's go through several basics and words and terms and connections and what have you. Vyzz here is a member of the VIIIs. And according to the last G report in Dirge of Cerberus, the VIIIs are hellspawn of G and thus were treated with Genesis genes. According to a Q&A with the developers in a Crisis Core book. I don't quite remember which one, I think it was Crisis Core Ultimania or something. So they've been treated with Genesis genes, but not G-type Genoa cells. With Genesis genes, that's different. So they're not tainted actually with Genoa cells per se, because Vyzz is the Immaculate. And G-type Genoa cells don't really come up anywhere in there. G and Genesis not in the slightest, besides the enigmatic G, and you also should remember that Dirge of Cerberus came out before Crisis Core. So the secret ending was a real mystery until Crisis Core came out, and then, that's this guy. But more on that later. So G refers to Genesis, and now VIIIs are a special elite unit of soldier in Deep Ground, practically the highest rank you can achieve. And the word VIII means color, although only VIIIs that have been treated with Genesis genes received the color epithet. Vyzz the Immaculate, Nero the Sable, Rosso the Crimson, Azul the Cerulean, and Shelk the Transparent. It's not really color, but it fits her S&D ability and her other abilities. And there's also Argento in the online version of Dirge of Cerberus. Which you might remember, she's the one who created the weapons for Rosso, Vyzz, and Shelk. Now, Vyzz here is the strongest of all of the VIIIs. Possibly because it's been showered with pure Mako. He's the only one who only has pure Mako within him. That's why he's the Immaculate. And interestingly, he harbors the combined power and possible abilities of the others, barring Nero. Because otherwise he would be tainted, and it wouldn't work for awakening Omega. So because of his inhumane strength, he's shackled to his throne and only released every once in a while for being tested for battle, or maybe some other experiments. Sometimes even important missions, very important missions, as you can see in a scene in Crisis Core where he and Nero appearing in their Soldier First Class uniforms, picking up Genesis after he lost against Zack. Their faces aren't shown, but the voices are the same. However, all those missions are under strict supervision. Now what's interesting is that they are calling Genesis their brother, and Genesis calls Vyzz his brother in the Dirge of Cerberus' secret FMV scene. Why brother? Because they share his genes. However, Genesis chooses not to participate in any Deep Ground shenanigans, so he just goes back to sleep in this water cavern below Midgar and waits. And only awakens when the next crisis is on the horizon. And I think it was Omega who then awoke him, kind of, and Vyzz's defeat then did the rest. So we see him then in the secret FMV scene appear in this sphere of water and picking up Vyzz and flying away. Unfortunately, they never followed up on this, so the remake might provide some answers, or maybe not, because now, post-Midgar, many things could change, and compilation could just not exist anymore in that new timeline, which I kind of have a feeling to, but that's for another video. Let's get to the restrictors. I mentioned them in a previous video, but the restrictors are the 14th soldier unit dubbed the Lost Force. The face is always covered with a complete mask, so they're not seen by anyone, and complete hides their identity this way. Their main function is to ensure order and keep the VIIIs and the other soldiers through chip implants under control by using the supercomputer Patricia. Now, the main plot of Dirge of Cerberus' online mode is Vyzz and the other VIIIs, including Argento, conspiring to overthrow the restrictors and get rid of their chips, so they're not controlled anymore and are free to do whatever they want. A short reminder about Argento. She's a female Zviet, exclusive to Dirge of Cerberus' online mode, and again created the weapons for 3 of the Zviets. And she has her eye patch because she lost an eye in a battle against the Restrictors. Because of this and probably other reasons, she supports their cause. Also part of the Dirge of Cerberus online plot is the player who is unreceptive to the Restrictors' control. Why? Zviets discover the HJ virus, which is capable of taking down or passing through the supercomputer's firewall, and thanks to Argento's supervision and Shulk's synaptic net dive, they're able to disable the chip for the player character. Which is how Vyzz eventually manages to kill one of the Restrictors through the player distracting the Restrictor enough, but then he learns about the kill switch in his own chip. In case the supercomputer Patricia doesn't register the vital signs of any Restrictor anymore, then the kill switch will engage, and Vyzz has then 3 days to live until he dies. The whole plot of Dirge of Cerberus' online mode happens shortly before Meteor Fall, so after the beginning of Final Fantasy VII, so all of this hasn't happened yet. Just for some more context and reminder about Dirge of Cerberus. In Dirge of Cerberus, spoiler incoming, Hojo sends his mind into the worldwide network. However, Meteor Fall shuts it down, and Hojo's mind gets fragmented. However, a few weeks before Dirge of Cerberus starts, the WRO, the World Regenesis Organization, takes it back online, which is when Hojo's mind can reform, and probably around this time Vyzz manages to kill the last Restrictor, and the kill switch engages, and now he has 3 days time to search the S&D for answers, for something, for a cure, whatever. And in this time it's when Hojo invades Vyzz's mind, and resides there even after Vyzz's death, and then controls his body, so to speak. And orders Nero around to even start this whole plan about sacrificing people with pure spirit energy to force or trick Omega into awakening, and you know Hojo, whole shenanigans. But here's where Genesis comes in. The World Regenesis Organization. I have a feeling this word hasn't been chosen by random. So kind of resetting the world, a new beginning, could just be that. But Genesis was meant to be part of a bigger plot, as seen in the secret FMV, which also leads me and others to believe that Genesis might appear in some form in Intermission. Speaking of, Intermission is a short break between the parts of a performance, such as a play, movie or concert. A play, huh? Now in Vyzz's quote in the new Famitsu article, he says, "Let's play the beginning of the end." This is a literal translation. Others translated it differently. But in general, let's play, as in a theater play, the beginning of the end. Maybe the 5th Loveless Act? Fifth and last Loveless Act starts now. Or maybe not. Although Vyzz's quote here kinda sounds like Genesis has rubbed off on him in some way, like the theatricals and obsession with theater plays. So yeah, if Genesis appears somewhere, this DLC will probably be the only place which he wouldn't feel shoehorned in too much. Maybe the end of the whole remake project, but this again is for another video. The article also tells us that the pure white emperor, as in the Immaculate Emperor, which he's been dubbed in the Dirge of Cerberus Online component, kind of mockingly because he's not really an emperor, he's just chained to his throne there. Anyway, they say here, he controls Shinra's top secret underground experimental facility, Deep Ground, and the superhuman fighting power, yada yada yada, and is vicious and tyrannical. Now they also say under inhumane control, like the restrictions, he has the chip in his head and the chains. He quietly awaits for the opportunity to rebel. Well, he certainly does so by scheming to get the restrictors out of the equation. However, this whole White Emperor who controls Shinra's top secret underground experimental facility Deep Ground might also play into the role of Yuffie and Sonon in there. Because you might remember, he calls for the hunt, lets the hunt begin, which might start with sending normal Deep Ground soldiers to Yuffie and Sonon. It's also very much possible that he tests Yuffie and Sonon to see if they might be able to help him in his rebel scheme. And of course it doesn't work out, so he has to resort to other means, as we see in the Dirge of Cerberus' online component with the player character. Unless they do a little switcheroo and Yuffie and Sonon actually help him inadvertently and without meaning to in his schemes, which would then completely change the canon of Dirge of Cerberus, at least in terms of Weiss. But for that we'll have to see until Intermission drops. In this last section I'd like to cover the extended Enigmatic Lines. You might remember the first one. Guided by the cries of the planet, the wheels of a new destiny begin to turn. Now with this blog post or article, they added another line. The world that you see with your eyes, the screams that you hear have not reached your friends. Very enigmatic indeed. Now with only this first line, it could just refer to Yuffie, as in a new destiny pertaining to the remake. She's new, she hasn't been in the remake yet. It's a new destiny, the wheels of which have begun to turn, and guided by the cries of the planet, so the whispers essentially, or fate, she's guided by them. Which would make sense, because by that point, as her story runs parallel to chapters 8 until probably the end, everyone's still guided by destiny, and as long as they stay on track, whispers don't need to interfere. And as far as I can tell, Yuffie and Sonon and the others are not really affected by anything fate-altering, like they're not really affected by Barrett and the others, not affected by Cloud or Aerith. Maybe Nelly interacts with Jesse and this sparks some kind of deviation which needs to call the Whispers into the scene to rectify events, so it's possible they appear, but this is too much speculation at this point. However, the second line, the world that you see with your eyes, the screams that you hear have not reached your friends. In my book, that does not fit to Yuffie or this DLC or Intermission at all. I just can't see real connections there. So, who sees the world with their own eyes and hears the screams which haven't reached their friends yet? Currently I can only think of one, and that is Zack. Now let me explain. This is a little bit of a teaser for this sometime upcoming ending analysis. Zack, he's now alive. He survived his last stand. So now, instead of being dead, he sees the world with his own eyes, the new world for him, and the screams from the Whispers. But those screams haven't reached his friends yet. Which makes sense, because at the time that he survives, where he shouldn't, Cloud is still catatonic, Tifa's still in Midgar and has no idea that he's alive, Aerith is in Midgar and has no idea he's alive, so the screams that Zack hears hasn't reached the others yet. And the world that he sees, the new world where he is now alive, also hasn't reached the others yet, because otherwise they'd know. Now, if the first line connects to Yuffie and the second to Zack, yeah, could be because they had interactions in Crisis Core, quite a lot actually, although most of them optional. I still can't really see why the first line then needs to be about Yuffie. It's too straightforward. What if the first line also is about Zack? Guided by the cries of the planet, because the planet now made sure that Zack survives. Remember that they don't need to ensure that he dies, because he dies anyway. There were no other forces around to change it. However, we saw 4 Whispers flying about the battlefield. So they changed something, and this change led to Zack surviving. This is where the wheels of a new destiny begin to turn comes into play. The planet guides this new wheel of destiny, which began to turn. However, the world that this new destiny now sees and the screams which this new destiny hears have not reached his friends yet. They don't know about his existence, which is good, because Cloud would be screwed over otherwise, and probably the others as well as a result. So, my current theory is that those enigmatic lines are about Zack, and that Intermission might give us a glimpse of what Zack surviving is all about. Maybe. Maybe not, maybe I'm just making stuff up again, but that's what currently makes the most sense, fits, and doesn't really need a lot of assumptions there. Now, as far as I can remember, Nomura-san said that Intergrade has nothing to do with the story, but is just about being a transition between PS4, PS5, and sort of an evolution. Which makes sense. However, intermission now comes into play. And intermission is something between main acts, which is of course the case. It's DLC that is released between part 1 and part 2. However, what if this also applies to the story? That this DLC, intermission, also happens after part 1 is done. Confusing? Hear me out. After part 1 ends, all the changes they have caused throughout the game have been committed. The Whispers weren't able to revert the changes. So whatever happened in Remake Part 1 is now canon. Literally everything. And that's where the unknown journey comes into play. Stuff can change now. Which means Rufus is aware of the Whispers, Zack is alive, the party have a stronger bond, which is why Red 13 provides his nose to the hunt, instead of just saying, oh well, I'll accompany you until Cosmo Canyon and then I'm done. So changes have been made. However, stuff still happened. And it's possible that we now see the events, starting with chapter 8, from Yuffie's perspective, is kind of a rerun of what's already been committed now to the new reality, and Zack is alive. See where I'm going with this? So it's literally, even in lore, in between games. It's not just in parallel to the first game, it retells the story as it has been committed after Remake Part 1. But again, I could just be talking bollocks and we can move on. But it's still fun to speculate. Now there's just one more tidbit and shout out I want to deliver. And it's about the title, Intermission. The word inter could also be inter, which means to entomb or bury somebody. A mission to inter somebody? Or something? Maybe to entomb the old, or put to rest the old canon, the old timeline? Or somebody else? I don't think so. In any case, huge thanks to @FaxmusMachinimus on Twitter for bringing this detail to our attention. Thank you. Alright, we finally reached the end of this huge analysis. I know it was a mouthful, had a lot of content, but it had to be made. So for all of you who managed to stick until the end, thank you so much for your dedication. It really means a lot. And what also means a lot to me are my very few but very dedicated supporters. Huge thanks to Harkos for yet another pledge upgrade. You're just so generous. I love you, brother. Alright, if you really like this content and want to keep watching such content, then please leave a like and subscribe and hit the bell. Select all notifications to be notified whenever the next video drops. It might be an analysis video, might be some more discussions, might be the next pulse of the live stream, who knows. In any case, join our Discord server if you haven't already for more in-depth discussion about this video, about other topics pertaining to Final Fantasy VII Remake, the original, or any other game you desire, or any other small talk. We're there for you, we love to talk, and you're welcome. You can also follow us on Twitter if you haven't already for a little bit more content. The CCO gems, like those little analysis bits, have been stagnating a little bit, but if time allows, I'll try to post more. But there are already a lot of them available, so just search for #CCOGems to look through them all. And now I need to go back to finish Cloud and Sephiroth's script, which is another huge one, but that one will be broken up into pieces, because otherwise it will take ages to finish. So with that, stay safe and take care. Vyzz with that, signing off.